Hello, I'm Andrew Hyatt. I'd like to talk today about EKG version 0.3. This is the basically the third major version. But before I get started on talking about what is in this version, let's just recap what EKG is all about. EKG is a note-taking app for Emacs. It's primarily distinguished for storing everything in a database instead of files. And consequently, there's a lot of benefits to this. There's things you could do very quickly and easily that are hard to do in file-based systems. And it's, even things like EKG Rome have databases, but then you have to make sure it's in sync with the files. This is just a database, so it's always in sync pretty much. So, it also has disadvantages. Not everyone likes this. Files have certain advantages, but I think this is an interesting note-taking system that I've been working on, and there's users who seem to like this style of note-taking. So let's, besides, I'm not going to go in and talk about all the various features, the philosophies, etc. We have other, I have other videos on that. If you want to look at my channel, there's you could just watch all the EKG videos from there and see kind of what's up. There's not much. There's only a few videos because we only have a few versions yet. Okay, so let's start about you can kind of see my notes I'm working with here. There's two major things to talk about: inline commands and Logseq syncing. So let's talk about inline commands. An inline command is a command that is inserted into the text. And I think one interesting thing to say is, as I said, this is all databases. It's not actually part of the text. It's stored separately and it's easy to understand via SQL queries. What commands are being used, where they're being used. You could easily change the commands via SQL to some other command if you wanted to do that. So it's all pretty easy to deal with. So it's, you might not care that the storage is separate, but it does kind of affect how easy it is to work with this, especially in the future as we might get more sophisticated with these. So an inline command just executes something and puts some text in the buffer as a result of that execution. And so they exist at some point in the buffer, and they just do something. And they do it in this view that I'm looking at here, which is like a note, a view of notes. There's like the notes view of EKG, which lists out many notes, one or more. Today we're looking at my today's date, and we could see here that, well, this doesn't have any transclusion commands, but we could. Let me kind of, I'll demonstrate what they are with the included commands, which are transclusion commands. I think I just mentioned transclusion. Sorry. But transclusion is basically you're going to insert something from another source inside a note. So this is pretty straightforward. We have other note systems do this as well. We have a slightly different take on it in which we don't separate this we don't sort of visually denote here what is a transclusion. It's all very invisible. If you want to visually denote it, then you can add the new lines and anything else you want to add yourself in the note. Otherwise, it's completely inline and you would not be able to tell from the notes view like what is transcluded and what is not. Transclusion works in, you could have things that are transcluded, include transcluded things that include other transcluded things, and so on and so on. It should all work. The reason I kind of wanted to start doing this is because I'm interested in using EKG as a way of creating prompts for large language models. It's one thing to understand about transclusion is you don't actually even need you don't need to use it in the context of EKG. It's sort of separable in a way that you might not be able to store it because EKG is the only really way to store these things. But if you could sort of store it in sort of like source code, and it does work. So let's demonstrate the transclusion commands so you can get a feel of how this works and what it actually looks like. First, let's start by doing a capture. EKG capture. And then, so you can, we won't bother with the tags or anything. We'll do EKG edit, add inline. I have a key binding for this, but you can make your own. By default, there's no key binding. Once you do this command, it allows you to, so it's going to have all the possible inline commands there are. Right now there's just 3: transclude note, transclude file, and transclude website. Let's demonstrate transcluding a file. So I happen to be in the EKG source directory. Let's do EKG, actually let's just do git ignore. And you can see what the transclusion command looks like here. It's just you can see it's %, then just a S expression. So like the first thing is the command name, transclude file, and then the arguments. So in this case, there's just one argument, but there could be more. You can't write arbitrary elisp here. So it's restricted because I feel like it's a little bit scary to for your note display just to start running arbitrary commands that could theoretically do anything. So also, I'm not sure how useful it is for there to be that level of flexibility. But this is what it looks like. So pretty easy. You can just you don't have to add it with the command. You could just type it out if you wanted to. And once you save this, actually let's just put some text surrounding it. So my git ignore file looks like this. Okay, so let's do it, and then we can see basically, here's my new note. The command has been replaced by the contents of the file. So pretty easy, pretty simple, nothing to it. Same thing would happen with note, website. Just the website is really the, it's the text of the website. It's not the HTML, but it's not sort of made into a readable format. It's probably only appropriate for websites that have very short text that is useful for some reason, not just arbitrary websites. So let's, if we edit this, you can see okay, we go back into this mode where you can see that it's the transclude file. Okay, so let's go back to our notes here. Okay, so you could add your own commands. You just have everything as EKG inline command dash whatever. So if I just show you EKG inline command, there's transclude file, note, website, add your own. You could do output whatever you want to. There's documentation on how to do that. There's one other kind of inline command, and those are note inline commands, or display note commands, which is they don't do arbitrary things. They take a note and they could produce arbitrary text depending on the note you're viewing. So this is primarily useful for changing the note layout with EKG display note templates. So these notes have a specific format. So it's very similar to the command format, but it has a %n instead of %. And these are all the commands like ID, tagged, title. These are all types. to get into this is a little bit much, but let's just say that each note, each entity that we look at has many different types. So there's a note type that has like the text, it has the mode, it has any inline commands, and then there's tags. Tags are a different type. You don't have to have text to have something to be tagged, but that's what, the application now is mainly about text. So like things are notes, but you could have anything that's tagged, but tagged is separate. So each one of these types is stored separately and is displayed separately. And so in the EKG note display note template, we kind of describe how things look. And this actually corresponds to what you see here. So this is how this is displayed according to this variable. So first we have the ID. This particular note does not have a distinctive ID enough to display. It's kind of meaningless, so we don't display it. But the tags, the title, and then the text. You can see text has an argument, 500. That means we're not going to display more than 500 words. And other. So what is other? This is actually kind of the most interesting part, is that let's say that there's other types, random other types that are useful later. In the schema we have now, I have like a person type. I haven't really figured out how to use it yet, but this is going to be a step towards using that, which is that if you do create a person, that is like contact information about a person, like what's their name, what's their email address, what's their phone number, you can have a note function that corresponds to that type. So in this case, it'd be EKG display note person or something, assuming that's the name of the type. And it knows, it gets the note, and it can just read out what the data that it cares about and display it however it wants. So you can now we can start having things that are not just notes, that are other types of things. And you could, if you knew about this, you could, put it here somewhere, wherever you want to. Like if there's not text, there wouldn't be anything here, but if you can put like a person, %n person, and if there's no person, there's not going to be anything, so it's blank. That's fine. And but if you don't, like, not everyone might just customize this, and that's fine. Other is sort of a catch-all. Any other types will be dispatched to the proper, if there's an existing function, it'll be dispatched to the existing function, and it'll just appear there in some order that you don't really control. If you want to control the order, change EKG display note template. Okay, so hopefully that concludes inline commands. As you can see, it's flexible. It's useful for hopefully all sorts of things, and I hope people continue use it and suggest interesting other commands. I'm sure there's a ton that could be useful here. Okay, so let's talk about Logseq syncing. It's kind of hard to say. First, let's talk about what is Logseq. Logseq is a note-taking application, so basically a lot like EKG. However, it's open source. It's not Emacs based. It is Emacs friendly. It is you could choose to have the notes be org mode notes, which is great. So I think it's, especially for Emacs users, it's sort of a favorite other alternative for using notes. And I think the interesting thing about it is that you can sync your notes to your phone. So basically, I like to use it mainly just so I can get my notes on my phone. I can enter data on my phone. I could read my notes on my phone, etc. So super useful for that. Other people may have other reasons for using Logseq, or if you don't use Logseq, that's fine. I'm just letting you know, like, why do I like Logseq? Well, that's why, and this is why I sort of made a syncing for Logseq. So you could do a sync, but before I want to kind of say it's important to back up your Logseq directory that I'm assuming is on your machine before you start. And The problem is like, we're doing reasonable things. However, I'll be talking about some differences in formatting, and the things are not perfectly lined up. You may not like what the sync actually does. So therefore, both your EKG and your Logseq should really be backed up. EKG backs itself up anyway, so you shouldn't be too worried about that. But please do be careful here before you make changes that are kind of hard to revert. Okay, so it's pretty easy how you could do this. You just EKG, Logseq, sync. You could do actually two things: sync and export. There's no import. We do import, but I just feel like I don't really understand why people would import without ever exporting. It's sort of like, it's not, Emacs is not the most convenient form to read your notes. It's more like useful for creating notes. So to me, I think exporting is useful, not really importing. Feel free to suggest otherwise on the EKG project if you really think that importing should be an actual command here. But sync will do import and export. So you could do EKG Logseq sync. So let's just do this now. And it keeps track of what it has done before, or like the last date of the import, and looks for notes that are created or modified since then. And so it's quite fast. It'll just export the changed things. Similarly, when it does an import, it looks at the dates of the modifications, and it'll just process files that have been changed since your last import. So of course, your first import is going to try to do everything, etc. So that one takes a while longer, but it's not an incredible amount of time. So what you should know about the differences of formatting is that Logseq and EKG have different designs. Logseq has a design where what we would call a tag, every tag, has a bunch of different top-line entities. So it's basically just like a page per tag. And that page is divided up into sort of top-line, in org mode, you have your top, your outline structure, and the top-line entities are sort of structured in those are kind of just linkable. In fact, even smaller, any part of the hierarchy is really linkable. What we do is we take those top-line entities, those sequence of top-line things, in either org mode or markdown. We could do both, but we modify it. So this is what we import. So a chunk of that is really what we're going to import as one note, and we similarly export as just that one chunk. But there's a difference. In Logseq, you enter it in you enter things in one tag, in one page, right? And then you want to link it. You might link it to something else, like, oh, it was, this is linked to, some date, or some other tag. That's fine, but this is not exactly an equality of, there's a primary thing, and then everything else is sort of it just has a backlink. That's not how EKG works at all. In EKG, all the tags have equal footing. There's no notion of like a primary tag. So we basically have to say, like, okay, we're going to have the primary tag will be like the first tag that's not a date. And then we kind of, for EKG, so when we export, we kind of say, like, okay, we're going to actually put the text in everything else, and it'll just kind of reference all these other tags that it has. And that way we sort of, kind of manipulate it to be in the Logseq format. So there's like these little different, like there's more kind of little differences of how these things structure. So things that I think a big one is that this top line thing that appears in org mode in Logseq, the way you would write it in Logseq is like that would be a meaningful sort of like title for, or intro to what you're writing. Whereas in EKG, it could be just text. It's sort of like it's just not quite structured the same because of how you write notes in EKG versus how you would write the same note in Logseq. So we basically consider that first line to be a title. And if there's no title, if you don't have a title, you could title notes or you could not title notes in EKG. If you don't have a title, we just say untitled note. So for me, like all these notes for Logseq just say untitled note and then content, untitled note and then content. That is not a great experience, but that does make sense. I think the alternate of like just having the content there would produce some weird outcomes that would be a little bit unpleasant as well. So at least this one is, it may be a bit repetitive, but at least it's not messing up your content. These things are normal. Like it's hard to get around these kind of differences in philosophy and design when importing and exporting between these kinds of systems that are just not quite the same. But it works. It works and it's useful. So I hope people try. I hope people can use it and it's useful for them. Also people just find it's a little bit scary to have all your notes in a database. We do make care to back up that database alongside your other Emacs backups. But still, a lot of people don't quite like that aspect of EKG. So like, if you just want to have them in files for whatever reason, you can use this export to do that. So you're really not going to, you'll have some other sort of, not just a backup, but like another format of your backup. There might be, perhaps in the future, there might be other types of syncing. You could already import from org Roam, but that's a one-way import. But there could be other, I don't think we're going to have output to org Roam. I guess it's possible, but, people have talked in the discussions about syncing to denote or things like that. Certainly possible. I don't really know a lot about denote, but it's relatively easy to do this. So anyone could just look at how we do it in Logseq, and pretty much all the complications there are just dealing with minor differences in how the layouts are, and trying to do things like we do try to like sort of, if we transclude a note, we try to make that into a Logseq transclusion and vice versa. So there's stuff like that probably is not going to be applicable to other types of syncing. There's a bunch of other changes we have done here. I think there's some problems with the way we're doing window management. I was a bit sloppy with that, and now we play nicer with people that are customizing window configuration. I think one of the big things is the metadata overlay. So let's go back here. So it used to be in the previous versions, this would there was some stuff above here, and this part, the part that's like text follows this line, didn't exist. So it was like a prefix of this overlay that's saying like, oh, these are the note properties. This had some issues, and this whole note overlay thing is a particularly difficult point. You could always, in the previous version, you could like, what would happen if you try to back up over the overlay? Like these are just two different, like this is the text, right? And this is not the text of what you're like. It's just, these are properties that are stored in the database. There's not a great way to do this in Emacs. Maybe someone can suggest something, but like I've tried atomic windows, that was a complete disaster. It's just kind of hard to have two different things, both easily accessible, I think visible at the same time. It's important to me, easily navigatable, but and interactable, but like they're separate. It might be better if this was at the bottom than at the top, but the way we're doing it now is it's almost exactly like how message mode in Emacs works. This text follows this line looks like that. It was just modeled based on that. My thinking was like, oh, people might have seen this before in message mode. At least it'll be a little bit more intuitive what's happening here, because like in message mode, there's similar things like from, to, subject. So it's familiar. They don't really attempt to do anything special here, as in protecting it from, it's all just like in message mode, you can like delete text follows this line. I don't want that to happen. Maybe that's a design mistake, but this is what we've done. So a lot of effort spent to making sure that things, I could type a title here, and if I press return a bunch of times, it doesn't just scroll down, because like why? These are I don't want to have more than one empty line. These are really just for small numbers of properties. And if I delete over here, if I try to go back, I can't. It's good, it works. Not everything works. Like if you do org insert heading, like if you insert a heading in org mode, like that's not going to work for just complicated reasons, just because we're really just messing up. Like this part is not org mode. And then like when you try to do things, sometimes in org mode, it kind of is messed up because we have this special first part. So not great, but mainly I think it's not a big deal. These notes are not supposed to be like, I'm writing my thesis here. They're supposed to be small notes. You're not, I don't anticipate people are going to have a lot of hierarchy, a lot of complication here. So hopefully these design choices work out. So I think that's one of the more notable points of this release, is we're fixing that up. Various other changes, we changed EKG rename tag to EKG global rename tag because it's a little more obvious what it's doing. This is one of the highlights of EKG, is that like you could rename tags super easily. You just say like, oh, what's the old tag? What's the new tag? Bam, it's done. All the references are updated. It doesn't take any time. So very nice. We have, you could delete notes from the notes list like this. If you want to delete this, you can have a prefix. Wait, what's the one? Yeah, there we go. And now it's deleted, and without a warning. If I try that without the prefix, it would have a warning, which some people do not like. And we made EKG capture have unique buffer names, so you can have multiple capture windows open at the same time. Should all work. So I want to give a shout out to, there's some great both users and contributors. They're super active on the discussion forums. They're super active about opening issues. I really appreciate not only their thoughts, but they have helped me with many of these things. Some of these fixes, our suggestions, our implementations come straight from them. So thank you to our loyal users, Jay, Jingshui, and Kapram. Okay, that should finish us up. So this is 0.3. There's lots of, what do we do next? I don't exactly know. I have I think there's a few things that I want to tackle. I do want to put, now that I have transcription, I kind of want to make this work better as a actual repository for prompts, for large, interacting with ChatGPT and other large language models. Someone suggested this, and I personally want to start doing tag aliases. So it's just kind of useful to have two different names for the same tag sometimes. I think these are all possibilities. Please go to our, EKG. You can go to our website on GitHub and join the discussion and let us know what you think would be useful. You could, either by issue. It's fine to open an issue. It's fine to just use the discussion forum there. Thank you for hearing about 0.3, and I hope everyone can use it and enjoy it. Thank you.